Right on. Welcome to the 1 o'clock session. Mariana, are you there? She's on mute. Okay. Well, since we're recording, I'll
Hello.
I'll
Yes.
uh, I'll keep plugging along. Welcome to Documentation as a Native Content Type. My name's Bob McDermott. I'm a senior technical project manager with Lullabot. We're a longstanding 20-year plus Drupal firm. We're located all over the country. I happen to be located in Palo Alto, about a 5-minute drive from Stanford campus. So I know it really well and did some time earlier in my career there. Looks like we're adding some more folks. Hi, Abby. Welcome.
Hi.
Aaron, should we give a couple of minutes to let people come on from their last thing, or what do you think?
Well, the last thing was lunch, but sure, yeah, we can wait a few minutes.
Yeah, we can. It's Hi, Melanie. Welcome.
Hi.
We'll give everybody just a minute or two here, and then I will quickly repeat that spiel and Aaron and I were both on early, so we were all like ready to go.
I found the record button, so I'll be better prepared next time.
Aha. Okay. Well, I think so we can value everybody's time, we can get rolling. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome everybody. Nice to see you. My name is Bob McDermott. I'm a senior technical project manager at Lullabot. We're a remote distributed Drupal firm. We've been around in the Drupal community for 20 plus years, and I'm really pleased to talk to you today about documentation as a native content type. I think often documentation is one of those things that every dev thinks about, every dev is asked to do, but it often gets treated often like side quest status. It's the last thing you do, or it's something you play catch up at the end of the project, or if they give you a couple of days between the end of this project and the start of the next project, they're like, please write out the documentation. And in 20 plus years in Drupal and in tech teams, it's a symptom that I saw come up, and I love talking about this topic. Today's presentation will be, hopefully, a conversation about documentation versus just Bob blathering at you for 35 minutes. I'll go ahead and share my slides. And presentation mode going here. All right, so as I said, documentation is a content type, and the whole idea is transforming a static siloed liability into a dynamic integrated part of your product ecosystem. I think one of the biggest problems we get is that often documentation is done in a Google Doc afterward, or as a PDF that we store to the server, or something you get asked to do weeks or more after the project is done. And I think by building it into your system, the information is not going to rot in your head. Number one, it's always going to be fresh, and we can use the same content moderation ideas that we use for straight up marketing pages for the internal team. I've used this documentation as a content type even for the dev team as we're rolling. Like, I have the story, I built this content type. Here's how all the different field groups work. Here's how it presents. Here's how not to use it, in fact. So as you're building that knowledge transfer between developers, you can think ahead. You're going to need all this information for user acceptance testing, and those user acceptance tests often get converted into documentation. And if you're thinking about it from the very beginning of the product ecosystem, then it becomes less of a hassle and more of an integrated part of your process. The vision is simple, right? Treating documentation with the same rigor as we treat any other kind of our website content. And in Drupal, by making it a native content type, it lives in the same database as our features. It's no longer just text or something on the side, but it's something that's programmable, customizable by a dev that knows how they want to present the information. It becomes searchable and manageable from a single source of truth. So why this is a game changer? Actually, there are several. The first is we keep the help and the information right where the user is. If we're building a system, we can keep all the information about that system self-encapsulated. You can move it from environment to environment. If one of your dev team leaves, you can keep all that historical data rather than losing all that historical information about why something was built, how something was built, how it's intended to be used, and pro tips for using it correctly is a harsh word, but using it for the best way to talk to your audience. Webhooks ensure that when we hit publish, every head of our application is updated instantly. It's that create once, publish everywhere sort of COPE mindset. It's the idea that when we're writing documentation, it will eventually be used as how-to documentation. It'll be used as technical know-how. It'll be used to inform our bug list with deeper information. Any questions about it at a 30,000 foot view level? Does anything make somebody stop and go, this sounds like a great session, or this wasn't the topic you were expecting? I just want to level set. Nope. Okay, I'll keep running. So why Drupal specifically? I mean, yes, Stanford WebCamp made the tent bigger because there are other CMSs out there, but Drupal specifically has an architecture that's built around a structured relational data model. We don't have to fight the tool to make it model documentation correctly because the document content types are first class. We can define the document as an entity with custom fields, no code required. The JSON MPI ships and I'm really trying to speak slowly. Sorry about that. JSON API ships in cores, so every doc is instantly an API endpoint that we can feed the app, the dev portal, and the help site. And third, and I think the most powerfully, is content moderation gives us the same draft, review, publish workflows we use for marketing content, and it's open source and decoupled for headless, however we want to use it, avoiding any kind of vendor lock-in that we can pair it with at any front end. I'd be curious, stop here, how many people on the call, if you don't mind raising your hands or giving me a heads up, are using Drupal straight up, or are you using is it a heads up, or are you using headless? Anything in the chat? See one comment in the chat there. Aaron Cole's using Drupal straight up. Anyone else using headless Drupal, or what's your CMS of choice? Drupal. Thanks, Abby. Great. Okay, so I'll keep rolling. So on the right-hand side here, you can see that the editorial work for drafts, needs review, published, archived, apply per content type, and then you can add taxonomies to spread out that content. You can use audience, product area, version. Layout Builder lets us compose how each surface renders, and translations work natively at the field level. So it makes the information really easy to disseminate, particularly if you have a global audience. You can build it out in different languages at the touch of a button. And my up-down has stopped working. That's fun. Okay, so these 6 modules are the ones that I use in heavy lifting when I'm building documentation as a content type. The JSON API, as I said, ships in core, turns every doc into an instant REST endpoint. Views, also core, lets us build the help center related doc blocks, audience filter listings entirely throughout the configuration. If you've never used views is like a game changer for me. I remember before views how difficult it was to do this kind of thing, and it makes it really easy. Content moderation and workflows give us the governance story. Search API with Solr delivers that unified search promise across both docs and features. I know that Solr API does sometimes come with a heavy cost. Both it's complicated to implement and it can be a little expensive, but in my background, the Solr has been the best one. The webhooks, a contributed module, triggers front-end builds and cache invalidation the moment something is published. And paragraphs let editors compose docs from modular blocks, like for FAQs, code examples, which is a really strong use in documentation on the back end. Like not only why did I build it, but how I built it and why I chose this particular coding structure for this build out, and then step-by-step use for our end users. And most of this is core and really well-maintained contrib. We're not building anything on shaky snowflakes. So let's look at the impact. In the before world, the search is fragmented. The main site doesn't know the help exists. It might even exist off platform if you build it in Google Docs or rely on a PDF library. There's no way to search for that inside the Google ecosystem. There are some contrib modules that you can add that'll search a file directory, but having it right in the same database and speaking the same language as the rest of your Drupal stack really is a game changer. And in the afterworld, we're looking for use those webhooks to find the settings page and the tutorial all in one place. And we move from a reactive relationship with documentation to being more proactive. And this solves that internal institutional memory problem I was talking about earlier. We aren't just writing for us. We aren't writing internally. We're writing for the customer. We're archiving how it was built notes for our own developers. And we're keeping that technical archive in the CMS to ensure that when a developer leaves, their knowledge doesn't leave with them. It stays attached to the content type itself. We've gone as far at Lullabot to build in diaries for our devs as we're working on projects, even contributed paragraphs or layouts that we don't keep or don't end up in the final project. You never know when that piece of artifact code could get used in another project. So it always stays attached to the content itself. Any questions about this so far? I know I'm zooming along at about 900 miles an hour. I'm a little nervous. So any questions or comments at this point?
Hey, Bob, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So in our model, the developers write code and they push code, but it sounds like in this, they would be writing content to this content type. How does that work in like the sprint cycle?
Right, in the sprint cycle. So let's say somebody was built, I'm going to build Coffee Cup. That's always a classic example, right? So what you would do is build into the sprint time in their schedule. Like, yes, I'm writing code and Coffee Cup presents perfectly, but if there are anything that the developer learned or had to undo, or particularly if you're working front end, you're like, getting a white perfectly round coffee cup was a pain in the butt, and this is the CSS method or JavaScript method I use to manipulate the current code to make the perfect coffee cup. You can document it right there in the CMS and pass it on to a QA developer that might be curious, like, how did you do that without breaking the square coffee cup elsewhere in the system? That's pretty common. Those kind of notes that we might leave in a wiki, or you're also going to comment your code as a good developer, right? But this is more of a robust version of doing that.
Okay, and they do this in the production environment?
They can do this in the production environment because it would only be visible to developers on, you'd set up permissions so that this particular kind of technical documentation would only be accessible to technical people with the login. So you'd use the permission set and the visibility settings to make sure that it's only visible to people that need to see it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions before I keep moving along? All right, so what's the return on investment, honestly? Because every time you go to do a big paradigm shift like this, people want to know what the return on investment is. And I think it's really clear. We reduce support tickets because the answers are discoverable, written by the people that build it and the people that own the content. We speed up time to market because documentation is part of the definition of done. It's not an afterthought, to Aaron's point, right? You got developers that are slamming away in Xcode, right, trying to figure out what the next project is. But if we built documentation and commenting into the CMS as we went, like when you pass it off to QA and say, this ticket is ready, here's the things you could continue, and here are your UAT steps, we can take that documentation and refactor it into how-to documentation when the project is complete. And more importantly, you maintain that brand consistency. Everything's going to be wrapped the same way, look the same way. Our help center shouldn't look like a Google Docs directory. It should feel like part of our brand, right? So what I propose to start this out is a pilot phase. We'd pick one upcoming feature, like back to our point about Coffee Cup. Like, you don't have to do this like wholesale. You could try it with one sprint. You could say, when we build Coffee Cup, we're going to try this new way of doing tooltips, user guides, and dev archives inside the CMS to prove the value before we scale it out. It's not something that you need to implement site-wide and it's just this magic fix. Every dev group passing it on to the QA group, passing it on to the trainers on the front end for our users are going to have different needs and different ways of using the system. And you can plug and play with fields as you go, starting it with a pilot. and I'm a little embarrassed at quarter after. That's my entire set of slides. I was hoping we could open it up, turn on our cameras, and chat about this for a bit. I appreciate your time, and I'm a little nervous, so I'm moving quickly. But any questions from Abby or Carolyn?
No question. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Okay. It looks like a couple of people dropped as well. So, um,
Do you have any examples you could show us? Or
unfortunately, I don't. I was at Workday for a long time, and all their stuff is proprietary, and please don't show the back end of it. So,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, so for us, we have a separate Drupal site that uses the same theme our site uses.
mhm.
Like the look and feel is there. But yeah, it's all manually built, the documentation. So it's interesting the idea of incorporating it into your sprint cycle.
Yeah, it really helped for me because when, for instance, at Workday, it's a 24-hour coding cycle, right? So you in North America finish your code, and someone in Europe picks it up, right? So you can create that diary beyond commenting and stuff that you might do in Slack or in an IDE or somewhere else, and it's all archived and searchable in the product. So if in a year I pick up Coffee Cup and we need Coffee Cup 2.0, you can read through all the historical changes and gotchas that were involved in the first project, so you don't break any of them on the way.
That would be good context too in like Cloud Code for a developer.
Yeah. I was also discussing with Aaron before we jumped on the call that we use Cloud Code a lot to ask Cloud Code to build out a demo of this kind of content, stick it at a Drupal repo and say, show me all the different content types, all the different paragraph types rather, and their fields and what their options are. And then you can spit that out into a spreadsheet or something that's searchable. So that's something that I've honestly just recently started playing with. So welcome, Eli.
Okay, well, if there aren't
Oh,
any questions, we can give people some time back before the next session.
yeah, and I sent in a updated copy of my slides to the Stanford Webcamp group, so you can see these, and you can find me through the Webcamp website.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to meeting you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Aaron.
All right, thank you.